We've all seen the footage, right? The steps of the Lincoln Memorial, a towering Dr. King, a peaceful, unified crowd of 250,000 people. It's an image permanently etched into our minds. But the history we usually accept, it's honestly heavily sanitized. And the true, on-the-ground reality of that day is far more complex and, frankly, far more fascinating than just a single speech.
So let's really dive into this. What if the most famous civil rights speech in history wasn't actually just about civil rights? What if the most iconic moment wasn't even planned? What if this incredible message of unity made King the absolute primary target of the United States national security apparatus? And, wildly enough, what if the speech itself isn't even free to use today? In this explainer, we're not just going to recite dates. We're going to treat history as a living world, full of mysteries, competing motives, and massive unintended consequences.
Chapter 1: The Forgotten Radical Demands.
You know, the true origins of this event go way beyond what most textbooks teach us. For starters, it wasn't just called the March on Washington. Its actual official name was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Organizers A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin intended to focus heavily on economic inequality. They recognized early on that integration would be severely limited as long as fundamental economic disparities persisted along racial lines. Yes, they were fighting for comprehensive civil rights legislation and the desegregation of school districts. But look at the economics here. They demanded a $2 national minimum wage. To put that into perspective, that's roughly $17 an hour today. They also demanded a massive federal jobs program to actually train and place unemployed workers, alongside fair labor standards across the board. It was a genuinely radical economic vision that saw labor and land as the absolute bedrock of civil rights. And somehow that crucial detail has largely been erased from our collective memory. Chapter 2: Censoring the Revolution. Behind the scenes, things were incredibly tense. A fierce ideological clash threatened to tear the whole march apart before it even got off the ground. Picture this. On one side, you have 23-year-old John Lewis, chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He drafted a fiery, militant speech criticizing the Kennedy administration's civil rights bill as too little and too late. He literally threatened a scorched earth policy through the South, comparing it to General Sherman's march during the Civil War. On the other side, moderate organizers and key allies like Archbishop Patrick O'Boyle were absolutely terrified by this revolutionary tone. They threatened to pull out of the event completely if the speech wasn't toned down. This led to elder statesman A. Philip Randolph personally intercepting Lewis right there on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. He pleaded with him, saying, "John, we've come so far together. Let's stay together. For the sake of unity, make these changes. Delete the reference to Sherman." And honestly, you just couldn't say no to A. Philip Randolph. Lewis, out of deep respect, agreed to censor his own speech. So the unity of the march was preserved, sure, but it came at the cost of its most revolutionary voice. Chapter 3: Lightning in a Bottle. So we move from the heavily edited, negotiated speeches of the morning to an afternoon moment of pure, spontaneous genius. Dr. King's prepared speech was originally titled "Normalcy, Never Again." He had stayed up until 3:30 in the morning meticulously drafting it, and it was a solid speech filled with historical and biblical allusions, but it was very much a scripted text. He stepped up to the podium and started reading his prepared remarks to the massive crowd. But then, gospel singer Mahalia Jackson, who was standing just feet away, interjects. She had heard King speak about his dream at earlier rallies in Detroit and Birmingham. She knew his preaching style intimately, and she could feel that the crowd needed more than just a script. So she shouts out, "Tell them about the dream, Martin." In that exact split second, King's entire body language shifted. His legal advisor, Clarence Jones, who was standing right nearby, later recalled this exact moment. King pushes his script to the left, grabs the lectern, looks out at the endless sea of people, and completely abandons his manuscript. He captured lightning in a bottle, preaching the "I have a dream" sequence entirely from memory and pure spirit. It was an act of historical improvisation that literally changed the world. It was an absolute masterpiece of American oratory. But here's the dark side of that triumph. What happens when a message of unity panics the state? The consequences of this moment were immediate, and honestly, they were chilling. Chapter 4: The Paranoia and the Price. See, the United States government didn't hear a dream. They heard a massive national security threat. Just 2 days after the speech, William C. Sullivan, the head of FBI intelligence and COINTELPRO operations, wrote this in a memo.
We must mark him now as the most dangerous Negro of the future in this nation, from the standpoint of communism, the Negro, and national security. The sheer scale of King's influence completely terrified the establishment.
And the escalation was terrifyingly fast. August 28th, the speech is delivered. By August 30th, the memo marking him as most dangerous is issued. And by September, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover successfully pressured Attorney General Robert Kennedy into authorizing invasive wiretaps on King and his closest advisors. Every single phone call, every strategy session, secretly recorded by the state. King's greatest public triumph simultaneously made him a permanent, intensely monitored target of his own government.
Chapter 5. Owning the Dream. Now, jumping to the modern era, you'd think the most important speech in American history belongs to the public domain, right? Well, not exactly. Because King formally registered the speech for copyright roughly a month after its delivery, it is fiercely protected as intellectual property. In a 1999 court case against CBS, it was confirmed that the speech's public performance did not constitute a general publication. The King estate actively protects it, and they've successfully sued major networks for unauthorized commercial use.
And that brings us to the year 2038. Under current copyright laws of life, plus 70 years, the full I Have a Dream speech will not be freely available for public commercial use until 2038, meaning if you want to use the audio or video of the speech in a commercial documentary or advertisement today, you have to pay a licensing fee.
Which leaves us with a really provocative question to ponder. Does enclosing historical memory protect a vital legacy from being exploited, or does it stifle our collective history? As we've seen, the 1963 March on Washington wasn't just a simple, peaceful gathering. It was a highly complex collision of radical economics, political censorship, spontaneous genius, state paranoia, and even modern intellectual property law. History is never just a neat sequence of known outcomes. It's a living, breathing world shaped by very real, very difficult human choices. Think about all of that the next time you see that famous footage of Dr. King. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history you think you know.